a stand-up routine or something. Give me a second to get situated here. You just keep that speech shot going for me over there. Oh, serious. Okay, perfect timing. So my name's Justin, and you just learned everything that you'll ever need to know about me. I'm very glad to be here tonight. I actually had no idea what this was or that it existed, but I had a friend, Anne, who some of you know, and she's a good friend. I work with her husband, Andrew, and so she emailed me and said, hey, we lost our speaker, and so we need someone in a pinch. And I've always thought that I could be that guy. So I also know Teal. She and I went to school together at Gordon Cornwall. But it's really nice to be here. We have something in common, you and I. You are a student at a school that has been mentioned in Forbes magazine. I was a student at a school that was mentioned in Forbes magazine. But my school was mentioned in an article called the 25 worst return on your investment education. And mine was number 2 on the list.
After Yale!
Love that. So I don't know how I ended up here, but I'm here. I have a question for you, though, before things get too far out of my reach. How many people today check Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or some? Okay, so that's a ridiculous question. That's the world that we live in. How many people within the last week checked their Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter account very quickly because you got a notification that said so-and-so commented on this? Okay, so you're like me too. So if I get a notification that says, it depends on what person says this, right? If it's a good friend and I see a notification, I'll be like, oh, okay, I could probably trust them. I can let that sit for like 30 seconds, but then I want to see what they have to say because maybe they're going to affirm me. Maybe they commented on my beard again. I want something good. If it's my parents that are saying something, there's just like anticipatory shame that wants to happen. I'm like, what would they possibly have to say? But then if it's like one of those borderline people that you don't really know and they think they know you better than they actually do, and then you're going and you're thinking, oh man, this could be bad. Okay, so that's the question. How many people have ever deleted a Facebook post or an Instagram picture because of a comment that was left on it? Okay, the rest of you are lying. Words are incredibly important. The words that people say about us, whether good or bad, they shape us, right? I mean, it's hard to deny that. And we know the power of good words instinctively because we know the power of bad words. And not bad words like filthy language or whatever, but a bad word like, I'm sorry, you're just not up to snuff. I'm sorry, you didn't get in. I'm sorry, you just don't make the cut. Those kinds of words. They're the words that can kind of give shape to and define your life. Maybe a word from a romantic interest that you had. I'm sorry, I'm not interested. Just crushing stuff, right? And these words are powerful relative to the closeness to the other person that you have. So I want to talk a little bit about words tonight, good words, bad words, and the fact that they have power relative to the significance of the person that's saying them. So if I'm on a train, on the T, right, and a random person comes up to me and is like, I hate you. This actually happened to me. I got punched in the face on the train by someone I had never seen. I was just sitting there minding my own business, and the person just walked up and punched me in the face. And I, to this day, do not know what I did. But, that shook me up, right? Because no one wants to get punched in the face. But I didn't take it personally. It's just kind of like, are you kidding me? But here's how you can tell the relative significance of words and punches in the face. If my brother said to me, I hate you, and clocked me in the face, now we're talking about a significant breakdown in relationship, right? And so if that's true, if words have power relative to the significance of the person that's saying them, if there's a God, then what he has to say about us will be the most significant thing in the world. What he has to say about us is going to put all other words in perspective. And so we're going to talk tonight from a passage in Psalms, Psalm 67, and I did not think ahead to get them to put it on the screen. So if you can grab your phone or if you have a paperback Bible, Psalm 67, and if you're searching, you can search Psalm 67 ESV. Psalm 67 ESV would be the search. I actually have to look it up on my phone to read it, sorry. I got it. I should have that memorized by now, shouldn't I? Okay, are we there? Psalm 67. May God be gracious to us and bless us, and make his face to shine upon us, that your way may be known on earth, your saving power among all nations. Let the peoples praise you, O God, let all the peoples praise you. Let the nations be glad and sing for joy, for you judge the peoples with equity and guide the nations upon earth. Let the peoples praise you, O God, let all the peoples praise you. The earth has yielded its increase. God, our God, shall bless us. God shall bless us. Let all the ends of the earth fear him. So you can keep your finger there, and I'll probably also send you to a few other places in the Bible. So Psalm 67, we're talking about good words. And the reason that we're talking about good words as it relates to this passage is that in the Bible and throughout church history, there's this thing, you may have heard of it if you've ever gone to a church that's a little more traditional. On a Sunday morning, at the end of the service, they'll do this thing called a benediction. Has anyone ever heard of a benediction? Okay. So if you haven't, what happens a lot of times is that the minister will get up at the end of the service, and it feels kind of like a quick way to just shut the thing down, right? Like, we got to end this somehow, fast. But he'll get up and he'll say, like, the Lord bless you and keep you and make his face to shine upon you and give you peace, right? Maybe those words sound familiar. If not, that's okay. Those words come from number 6, which is the background of Psalm 67. Because God, in the Bible, when he was putting it together and he was putting his people together, he was, and this is the first point, God was and is a good word deliverer. So he put priests over his people, and he said to do that, to go and raise your hands and to speak as if you were God to these people and bless them. God is a good word deliverer. And so this so characterizes God that when his people get together, which is what Psalm 67 is doing, it's a song that they would sing together in worship, much like we sang tonight. And it's a song that they would sing together to remind themselves about the kind of God that they're serving. So look at verse 1. May God be gracious to us and bless us and make his face to shine upon us. So at first glance, that sounds like wishful thinking, right? Like, may God bless us? Perhaps, I hope. But when you look throughout the rest of the Bible, you find out that these words are echoing other things that these folks are not saying this from a place of uncertainty, but they're actually saying it from a place of certain promise. And this is the most jumping around that we'll do tonight, so just follow me if you will. The background starts in Genesis 12. So God picks out this guy whose name is Abram, and his name gets changed to Abraham later, and God chooses to bless him for no reason whatsoever. Not anything that he's done, kind of in spite of everything that he's going to do, God decides to bless Abram, and he says these words in Genesis 12. And the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." So God is delivering this good word to Abram. The first guy that he picks out as his. He just starts with a good word. And then that idea keeps rolling throughout the Bible. So I made reference to number 6. Keep our passage in mind as I read this, and you'll hear kind of linguistic overlaps to see where this comes from. Number 6. The Lord spoke to Moses, who was the leader of God's people at the time, and he said, "Speak to Aaron and his sons," that's to the priests. So talk to the religious pastor guys, saying, "Thus you shall bless the people of Israel. You shall say to them, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. So shall they put my name upon the people of Israel, and I will bless them." So this is the source material for Psalm 67. It's pretty cool when you get into the Bible, you realize that it's written over a long period of time, and there are lots of internal references, and so it's fun to trace them. But the people of Israel are singing this song to each other because they are essentially reminding themselves of their primary identity. We are people that God has delivered a good word to, and as long as he keeps delivering that word, then we're going to go on singing about how he is a good word deliverer. And I think we can identify with Israel. I mean, I can, because I personally long for a good word. If you're like me, maybe you long for a good word because you've heard lots of bad words in your life. Or maybe you long for a good word because you've heard so many good words in your life, and they have mostly left you wanting. That you're still searching for like an ultimate, yes, I approve of you, from something outside of yourself. Or maybe if you're like me, you have heard all these good things, but there's still this kind of like internal loop of self-loathing in your head. Does anyone else have that going? That no matter how competent or successful or skilled you are, there's kind of this never enough thing happening in your head. And I can beat myself up over the stupidest things. I was beating myself up about how many Sour Patch Kids I ate the other day. And I love Sour Patch Kids, But that can send me into a cycle, and then I'm like, Sour Patch Kids to you're worthless. Okay, but when I say that, most people would respond like, dude, chill out. Take it easy on yourself. Be nice to yourself. And I get that, right? I mean, it's better to have an internal narrative of positivity than negativity. But at the end of the day, that is not advice that I can live on, because at the end of the day, I'm the one saying the words. I'm the one saying, "You are amazing, Justin," or "You idiot." Those are both. And if I have the ability in one day to swing from this extreme to this extreme, then there's something wrong with me. Or I'm just normal. One or the other. The problem is if I'm self-defining with these words that I'm speaking to myself, there's no way to tell what's right and what's wrong, because we all know that there are tons of terrible people throughout history that had incredibly healthy, maybe not healthy, but they had internal narratives that told them they were awesome. Right? People that did tons of damage in our world who thought that they were it. And then you can think of examples in the recent past of people that had, like, beautiful people that did amazing things in our world and touched our hearts. Someone like Robin Williams. Like, his internal narrative was so out of line with the reality of who he was. So if we are self-defining, if the word that you live on is a word that you're saying about yourself, I just don't think that it is enough. I'm looking for a cosmic good word. Because your good words are not good enough for me. The good words of my parents, I love them, but they're not good enough for me. The words of my boss, not good enough. And then this internal narrative is not good enough either. I need something cosmic, something from elsewhere. And I think that Psalm 67 is suggesting that God is a good word giver, a good word deliverer. And that thing that I talked about, the benediction, it's called a benediction. I don't know Latin. You all know it better than I do. But it comes from bene, like where we get beneficent, benevolent. It's just good. Benefactor. And dicere, which is where we get word. Dictionary, diction, prediction. So put them together, benediction, just good word. God is a good word giver. Now, perhaps you're here tonight and you're skeptical about the whole religion thing, or maybe you grew up in religion and in the faith, and now you're just filled with all kinds of questions. And you're hearing me talk, and maybe you are thinking, aha, I got you. You long for this cosmic good word. You desire it. You almost need it to survive, so of course you would invent it. Of course you would come up with a God who meets all of your needs, who says good things about you. Now, if that's where you're coming from, first of all, thank you for your humility in sitting in this room and listening to me. And I'm on the red line, so if you want to get coffee and talk, I'm serious. I'd love to talk, because I have things to learn from you. And your doubts and your questions, maybe I haven't considered them, or maybe they can sharpen me, or they can help me be more empathetic. Anyway, but if that's you, I want to just engage in a quick little dialogue. I'm going to play your part, because this is actually a monologue. But I'm going to do my best to be as fair as possible, okay? So my first question is, is it possible that there's a God? Is it possible? Now, if your answer to that question is no, it's impossible, then we can go get hamburgers or go watch movies, but this conversation isn't going to go very far, because you've committed yourself to some kind of fundamentalist epistemology that you're already closed to any idea other than your own. I'm trying to avoid that, personally. I want to be open-minded. I want to explore and allow the world to be what it is as it comes to me. So I hope that you would grant that it's possible that God could exist. If it is possible, my question then would be, if it's possible that God exists, is it possible that he can make himself known? If you say no, then again, we'll go see a movie. But if you grant me that it's possible that God could exist and that he could potentially make himself known, my question then is, what would God have to do to make himself known? With your working categories and the way that you're currently conceiving of the world, what does God have to do to make himself known? And now that you have that in mind, if there's something he could do to make himself known, and then he did it, and what he had to say was good, would that automatically mean that he didn't exist? Or is it possible that God can exist and he could communicate, and if he could communicate, then he could say something good? So all I'm trying to suggest by that little back and forth with myself is that just because I believe God did speak a good word doesn't mean that I made him up. That's like me saying the fact that you don't want to believe in God and the fact that you believe that he doesn't exist means that you made up the non-existence of God. That's not really fair. So let's talk more. I think God can speak good words, and that's, I think, what's happening here. Thanks for listening. So our second point. First, God is a good word deliverer. Second, the goal of a good word. We're going to look more in our text here. So according to the Bible, when God speaks, things happen. If you're familiar with the earliest chapters of the Bible, you know that God creates with a word. He says, let there be light, and then bam. I don't know how it happened, but it happened. The Big Bang. And the goal of a good word, as we find in Psalm 67, when God speaks, things start happening. The goal of a good word here is an outwardly faced community. And I want to unpack that a little bit. An outwardly faced community. When God speaks a good word to a people, it's to create a warm, open community of love that is faced outward for the purpose of letting other people hear and respond to the good word that God speaks. A community of warmth that is actively posturing openness toward others and tearing down barriers so that people can hear God's good word to them. So that's the first thing about this outwardly faced community, is that it's filled with good word repeaters. If you look at verse 2, actually start at verse 1 again. So we have this benediction, this good word. May God be gracious to us and bless us and make his face to shine upon us. Verse 2, that's a purpose clause. Your way may be known on earth, your saving power among all nations. So the goal of a good word is the creation of this outwardly faced community that's filled with good word repeaters. That your way may be known. And so when we hear this good word, our natural response ought to be that we live our lives and we use our mouths in such a way that all nations can see God's way and they can hear about his saving power. Christians are echoing God's good word that they have heard. The second thing about this community that's outwardly faced is that it is permeable. I feel like this is a pretty permeable community. That's my sense when I walked in here. Or when you all walked in here and I was sitting in that chair. Sorry, I was here early. I just learned about Harvard time tonight. Do you all come to everything 7 minutes late? Is that true? I'm going to start using that every time I'm late to a staff meeting. That's good. I got it from those kids at Harvard. So the second thing about this community is that it's permeable. Look at verse 3, if you would. Let the peoples praise you, O God. Let the peoples praise you. And then you'll see that verse 5 actually repeats that exactly. It's sort of like the chorus of a song. It's repeated so that we remember it. It's catchy, it's hooky. And it's like a sandwich around verse 4. So this permeable community is one that people can come into easily. So you see that there's this turn that happens in the beginning. In verse 1, it was saying, may God bless us. And then now there's been a transition to let the peoples praise you. So something is happening in this community in light of the blessing that has hit them, that is causing other people from outside their community now to bring praise to God. And so in a world where communities they have these strict entrance requirements, Christian communities tear down every requirement. There's literally no requirements for a Christian community. You don't have to have good grades. You don't have to have good CV. We're going to level the playing field and make this community as permeable as possible. And notice then that the people's praising God is not happening by way of coercion or heavy-handed proselytization, but what's happening is that this community is so compelling and so open that these people are responding with praise. And then the third thing about this community, so it's filled with good word repeaters, it's permeable, but it's also, as we see in verse 4, it's filled with purveyors of God's equity. Verse 4. We see why the nations are glad. Let the nations be glad and sing for joy, for you judge the peoples with equity and guide the nations upon the earth. So God, in the life of this community, is being revealed as an equitable judge and a song-inspiring shepherd. So the community of God is one where people look at it and say they are compelled by the justice and balance and fairness of this community. And that means that Christians at Harvard and the Christians in the local churches around Boston ought to be known as leaders on the issues of justice, social justice, and mercy. We ought to be known and characterized by impartiality and fairness, not showing favoritism to people because they're wealthy or influential or they can help us out. And we ought to seek to tear down cultural, racial, socioeconomic barriers that separate people. People ought to be able to look at Christian community and say, God is just. He creates just people. And when people see that happening, according to verse 4, when they see that God is a judge that is equitable and that he's a guide to the nations upon the earth, and they respond with songs of joy and gladness. And again, this is all connected back to verse 1, to the good word that we have heard. But if you're anything like me, you're incredibly cynical about this whole affair. Because good word repeaters, have you interacted with the Christians that I know? Christians are so far from being good word repeaters that it's laughable. I mean, like, back to Facebook. Have you seen my Facebook wall? And the people that I grew up with? And the kind of madness that appears to be rolling around in their heads? Fear-mongering? People think that Christians are insane. We're not known for saying good words. We're known for bad words. We're not known for benedictions, but maledictions. We are cursing and doomsdaying the world that we live in. And maybe you're not so extreme in that. I would imagine that you're not as someone who's attending Harvard. But, I mean, the fact of the matter is that those people are yelling so loud, and most of us, people who are like trying to be normalish, are so afraid of being associated with them that we're not even being good word repeaters, so it's not getting out, and all that's being heard is madness. And the obvious result of that is that our communities are not permeable. Christian communities are like fortresses that you have to try to break into. They're not places where you sense that there's that home-cooked meal that you've been waiting for, where you'll be embraced in your brokenness. Like when you hit rock bottom, do you want to go to church? Maybe. And impermeable communities means that communities are not purveyors of God's justice. And so we bite our lips when we see injustice. And we close our web browsers when the atrocities are too much to handle. And it's hard for us to see beyond Harvard Square into a city filled with need. And I'm throwing myself under this bus too. I'm the guy who closes the web browser. I'm the guy who walks to the tea and doesn't know his neighbors. And I'm the guy that didn't even do the ice bucket challenge. We have failed, I think. We're acting like we haven't heard the good word, like we haven't heard God's good word. of blessing and keeping and making his face to shine upon us. And so the nations are not singing with gladness in response to the community that they see being formed by this word. They're not singing with gladness. They're not seeking to join us. They're mocking us. How can I get away from those people as quickly as possible? And so, in this case, what can I do but cover my face in shame? I don't know what you do when you're ashamed. I cover my face, and it's almost like, if I can't see you, then you're not really there. What can I do but hide? How can God even look at me in all of this mess that I've just described? I've been relatively silent about my faith unless it's with other Christians. I've erected all kinds of barriers in my life to keep myself protected from people who are in need. And I really just haven't done a whole lot to be a purveyor of justice. And so here's what I'm expecting. I'm expecting not a cosmic good word, but a cosmic bad word. Something like, I did everything I could, but I'm going to have to let you go. It's not me, it's you. I did everything I can, but Justin, you are beyond hope. I mean, I've been wrestling with you for 30 years, and there is little to no change in your life. Waiting for the hammer to drop. And that'll bring us to our third point. The face of a good word. Okay, so I'm hiding myself in shame. I'm hiding my face so you can't see it. But what is your face saying right now? Our faces say all kinds of things, right? So when somebody's playing poker and they're really good at not saying anything with their face, you say they have a good poker face. When someone is incredibly angry or embarrassed, their face will be flushed or turn red. We all react differently, but when someone can't hide their emotions, we say, oh man, it's just written all over his face. So what is written on God's face when he looks at you? Does he hide his face? That he's ashamed? Does he blush? Is he embarrassed? Is he angry? Is he trying to hide his real feelings? Or does he just turn away because he can't even handle it? I came here tonight to tell you this, that when you are at your worst, when you have been let go, when your semester falls apart, when your parents are disappointed in you, when your friends don't understand you, when you don't understand yourself, when you are so ashamed of yourself that you cannot even look in the mirror, that God does not hide his face from you. God does not hide his face from you. And if you listen, you'll hear him singing those words, I bless you, I keep you, I make my face to shine upon you. I lift up my face upon you and I give you peace. I put my name on you. That's the divine benediction. That's the cosmic good word. And there's only one person in the history of our world that was denied a chance to hear it. There's a man who cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me? You can never cry out those words and it be true. Those words will never be true if they're coming out of your mouth. Because Jesus is the one who endured such violence at my hands that the prophet Isaiah had this to say, that he was as one from whom men hide their faces. This is how God has chosen to communicate himself. That Jesus became so ugly that we could not even look at him, so that when we are at our ugliest, God can still make his face to shine upon us. You will not be forsaken. God the Father has forsaken Jesus so that he never has to do that for you. He turned his face away from his only Son so that he never has to turn his face away from you, his child. God judged Jesus with equity. He will not judge you for those things that he's already taken care of in Jesus. And so Jesus did this gladly. He bore all of the mess and all of the failures and the disappointment and the nastiness and the brokenness and the shortcomings, all the violence and all of the sin of our world, so that now, instead of waiting for a hammer to drop, waiting for a cosmic malediction, a bad word from above, we get to try to cope with the fact that God says, I approve of you because of Jesus. At your worst, I call you my child because of Jesus. It's all there in the shining face of God. And I'll wrap this up quickly. The New Testament tells us that after Jesus was crucified, he was nailed to a cross. You remember the story? To bear all the stuff I just talked about. And he bore the ultimate malediction, death. That's the worst word. That's the worst bad word ever. And God says that it doesn't have any, it doesn't ring anymore. That word does not echo. Remember we sang, "O death, where is thy sting?" So Jesus laid death in its grave. He rose from the dead, and then something interesting, something that we often skip over, happened. He gathered his disciples around him outside of town, and he was surrounded by people who were just an embarrassment at being his followers. You remember Peter denied him. So Jesus stood there, and he probably looked Peter in the eye. Thomas would have been there, the guy who doubted him. Really, all of them had just fled, remember? And so Jesus has risen from the dead, and they're all standing around, and he's about to do something insane, which is to just ascend into heaven. And he... I'm glad you guys laughed at that. But this is what the Gospel of Luke says happened, and here's where I want us to wrap up on benediction. Luke says, "And lifting up his hands, he blessed them. While he blessed them, he parted from them and was carried up into heaven." Now, I'm not certain, but being the Jew that he was, I think that Jesus was probably just reciting the most common priestly blessing of all. I bless you, I keep you, I make my face to shine upon you. There is no other blessing in Scripture that he would have been giving them. And so, what that means is that the last thing that the disciples ever saw was Jesus ascending into heaven in the state of perpetual blessing. And I want to tell you that he's still repeating it. He's still blessing. It was seared onto the disciples' imaginations, this cosmic good word, benediction. And what happened when they heard this good word? What happened when they knew that even though they had failed Jesus at this most incredible moment, they had just mucked it up, and then he still gave them the blessing, and how did they respond? They became a group of good word repeaters. You know that they all, essentially, but for one, all the disciples were martyrs. They went out and repeated the good word that they had heard. And then they created an attractive, permeable community. The book of Acts is filled with examples of people being compelled and coming to this community for lots of different reasons. It was open and warm, they ate together, and they talked together, and they asked questions together, and they worked through this Jesus stuff together. And then it was a community of purveyors of justice. Now, I know that Christian history has all kinds of terrible things that's happened throughout it. We're a messy bunch. But an honest look at the record also shows that many of the greatest movements in the history of social justice have been driven by people of faith. And so I want to suggest that that's what happens when we hear this good word. And it also is going to make big changes. It's going to put all other words in my life in perspective. So when I hear a bad word from my boss, or I guess from a prof for you guys, it's not going to rock my world anymore because there's been this ultimate good word that's been stated. I'm a person that makes God's face shine. Not for anything I've done, not because I'm special. But that's true, that happened. And so I'm going to live in light of that. And what happens then is that this internal narrative, the Sour Patch narrative, it starts to shift. Because my primary identity is settled, and now there's a new tape playing in my head. It's God in Jesus saying, I bless you, I keep you, I make my face to shine upon you. I have already judged you in Jesus. What right do you have to go on judging yourself and to live like I didn't do that? And what this means, I mean, it's incredibly freeing because it just means that you get to be a normal person. And this whole self-narrative, that going back and forth between, you're awesome, Justin. Well, I'm not awesome. You're not awesome. Sorry. You're great, but you're not awesome. But I'm also not worthless. I'm a normal person that has been loved by God and is being made new and made whole. And there's going to be bumps and all kinds of stuff along the way. But I'm one who's loved by God. And that's news that's worth repeating. And so I'll close with this. Apostle Paul in this book of 2 Corinthians says, for God who said, let light shine out of darkness, there's that creative good word, has shown in our hearts, he's doing a good work in your hearts, to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. Jesus is the good word. Jesus is the benediction. Jesus is the self-giving pledge of divine benevolence toward you. That God is pleased to be your Father because of Christ. And I want to ask you, if God could speak, could he have said anything better than that? Let's pray. God, we're astounded when we actually take time to think about what you think of us. We ask now that you would forgive us for thinking of ourselves in ways that are out of line with how you think of us. Forgive us for our pride and our arrogance that would puff us up as awesome. And then forgive us for our miserableness, which leads us to treat ourselves as worthless, and help us to find our primary and ultimate identity in the good word that you have spoken over us in Jesus. Give us ears to hear it. Let us hear you singing over us. We thank you that you are a God who blesses us and keeps us and makes his face to shine upon us. And we ask that as we come into a greater understanding of this, of your gospel, of your good word, that we would be people that echo it, that repeat it to one another, to ourselves, to this campus, to this city. I pray this all in the name of Christ, our good word, our benediction.